In our motion capture class this week at Lesley University, we covered the topic of keyframe animation in Motion Builder. And in particular, there were two concepts there that I wanted to review in this video so everybody had as reference. The first concept that we covered in class was working with the IK Blend T and IK Blend R here in the character controls window. T for translate and R for rotate. Now the feet have these on by default. If I select the foot controllers, we can see that their IK Blend T and R are both at 100%. Now the other body parts are not. If I select the hand, we can see that its IK Blend T and R are set to 0. So what I'd like to do is show you how this can affect the posing and the animation of our character, or the interpolation, more specifically the interpolation of our character between keyframes. So right now I have this hand pinned. I have the pins on it right there, pin translate, pin rotate. I'm also in full body mode, and as we learned previously, full body mode means that the whole body is going to compensate when I pull on a body part using IK. What I'm going to do is just take that arm and I'm going to rotate it up. I'm actually going to rotate it locally, and that's another concept that I want to talk about after this one. So I'm going to rotate it up locally like that, as if it's planted against an invisible wall. So now if I come over here and grab, say, the center of mass controller, I'm at frame 0, and I move it, it looks like the hand is pinned against the wall. An invisible wall in this case, so that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and pose the character as if they're pushing against that wall. So in frame 0 here, I'm in full body mode with the center of mass selected. So if I hit the key button, that's going to key all of the body parts, all of the controllers on the body parts, because I'm in full body mode. So I'm going to hit the key button, and it sets a key on everything. And then I'll come out here to frame 30, and I'll push the body in this direction, like that. And then I'll set a key again. Again, that's a full body set of keys. And then I'll come out here to frame 60, and I'll move the center of mass back. So it looks like we've got a nice, well-planted hand on this invisible wall. So I'll set a key here. However, when I play the animation back, we'll notice something unusual with that hand, or unpredictable, or something we didn't anticipate. It slips a little bit, even though when we posed it, it was nice and perfectly planted. So what's happening here is that with the IK system, or I should say the IK and the FK system we have in Motion Builder, it sort of blends between these seamlessly behind the scenes. What's happening is when I have a body part selected, I can choose whether I want it to be fully influenced by FK or IK, or something in between. So if we look at the feet, their IK blends are both set to 100%, which means they will always be locked to their IK targets, whereas the hand is not in IK. Its IK values are set to 0, which means that it's going to be influenced by the underlying FK rig, or not rig, but the underlying FK joints that we're not really seeing. And Motion Builder is sort of hiding that information from us. So that's why we're getting this little bit of a sway there in the hand. If I take these IK Blend T and R sliders for the hand, and I set those to 100, now let's see how that affects the animation. I didn't change any keys or anything. I just simply pulled these sliders to 100. And you also notice that that controller became fully green. So that's a visual indication that its IK, T, and R are both set to 100. And so now if I play it, now we're getting the results that we wanted. So as we discussed in class, the main reason to take into consideration the IK Blend T and R is when we want a body part to stay completely planted against an object. If we don't want that, we can set them back to 0. And you may wonder, well, what's the advantage of setting them back to 0? Well, if they're at 0, then our hand or the body part will have more of an arcing fashion because it's using a little bit of forward kinematics in order to interpolate between the keyframes. So as we know, one of the principles of animation is arcs, and IK, when we're working in a full IK system like we're doing here by setting these blends to 100%, the arm or whatever body part is in IK, it will create a straight line between the two poses that we create. Whereas if we set these blend values to 0, then we'll get a little more of an arcing fashion. I could demonstrate that here with the other arm. So I'm going to select the other arm, and I'm just going to pose this arm. I'll keep it here, which is where it is, and it has a keyframe, because remember we set full body keys, so there's keys on these frames for this body part too. So I'm going to come out here to frame 30, and I'm just going to bring it over here like this, and I will set a key. Now I'm still setting full body keys. At this point, I might want to actually go to body part mode so that I'm only setting new keys for this one body part. So I'll go to body part mode and hit the key button. So now that hand slides in, and notice it has a nice arc to it. And actually I just need to set that one key right there in order to demonstrate this. So it has a nice arc to it. Now watch what happens if I take this hand's IK blend T and R and set those to 100 and scrub through that animation. Notice how the hand has a very linear path to its second keyframe right here, because it's being influenced 100% by IK, and IK is just position in space. So of course the application, in this case Motion Builder, and any 3D application will do this when they're working in IK, it's a straight line, shortest path. If I set that back to 0 and 0 here, again I get a nice arcing fashion. So the reason I wanted to point that out is because we could have a tendency to maybe say, well, we know that if we need to pin a body part and we don't want to deal with it slipping, let's just set all of the body parts to set their IK blends T and R to both 100, but then we lose the advantage of getting the arcing fashion that we have with an IK blend of 0, which gives us more of a forward kinematics approach. So that was the first concept that I wanted to talk about or review here in this video that we covered in class last week. The other one is rotation, basically just positioning in general with a rig system. So the two things that I thought were very important that we want to remember is that if we're working in IK, and IK, we usually only pose in IK with the extreme ends of the body part. So it'll be the legs, down here in the ankles, or it would be the hands. I noticed in class some people tried to grab a sort of an in-between body part here, one that's not at the end of a chain, and move the objects. And now Motion Builder will let us do that, but it doesn't really function the way we'd expect it to. So what we want to keep in mind is that the only controllers that we typically move using the translate tool would be the end, what we call sometimes the end effector. So that would be the wrist in this case, or the ankle. And most of the time when I am, and this is just some hints or tips and tricks I have, when I am moving those end effectors, I work in global or world coordinate system. In Motion Builder, we can change it here. In Maya, it's a little bit different, or any 3D application, they have different ways to switch between local and world coordinates. Now, the IK handles also do typically have rotation as well. Like here I had to rotate the hand up. So the other thing that I wanted to point out is that if we're posing with the rotate tool, I always do that locally. And as we saw in class, some of us were getting really unusual rotations when we were trying to move the character's arms. Again, I'm posing locally here. So I think what happened in class, what some of us were doing, was we were actually rotating globally And that is a little more difficult for the 3D application to figure out, how to set the key on that. And in Motion Builder's case, if we're posing body parts with the rotate tool globally, sometimes we get weird translations where if I want the arm to come forward, it decides instead it's going to go backwards to get to where it wants to be. So we can alleviate those problems more by making sure that if we pose with the rotate tool, that we're doing it locally. And then if we're moving a body part, which again would typically just be the hands or the feet, because those are the ends of the IK chains, then we move those globally. So position is global and rotation should be local. That will keep us from getting into trouble when posing characters in Motion Builder and again, like I said, in some of our other 3D applications. So those were the two concepts that I wanted to cover in here just as a review, so we have it as reference for class. So I hope that helps if anybody has any troubles.